Welcome to this video in which we will discuss how to counter the battle tactics of your opponents. So season 25-26 has been going on for a couple of months now, and well, people are getting to grips with the different tactics and different options we have. So I'm just going to lay it out a bit on the table what I would do with this thought of countering the tactics of your opponent specifically. So this is the list that I've been playing for a while. So I have Eridan, I have Inner Regiment, Stormstrike Paladors, Reclusions reinforced, and Concussors reinforced. And then I have 4 more heroes after Lord Terminals. Then I have Knight Arcanum for some magic, Knight Electro for some more pristiness, and Gotrek. I will do another video as well to just highlight Gotrek specifically, but I will do for the future. So we talked before about how to score your own tactics. So the tactics I would generally choose with this list is Intercept and Recover and Restless Energy. Let's see where Restless Energy is. Doesn't really matter too much. But, so Intercept and Recover, Restless Energy. Basically, it's win more. Both of them are win more in the sense that they don't impact your game plan too much, because you anyways wants to control an objective that your opponent control more objectives, and just it makes a bit of a choice of what objectives to go for rather than playing the game differently. Intercept and Recover has a bit of a more severe impact, that taking a double is more punishing, but generally I don't want to take a double anyways, unless I can completely wipe my opponent, and if I wipe my opponent then I don't have to worry about this either, because then I get 4 points. So I don't really miss the 5 points from the 1 treasure that would go away. Let's set this to some other stuff. So yeah, so we have Scouting Force, Master Paths on the board, Intercept, and I also want to talk about not Restless. Blocking Restless is really difficult. Morphle Cycles. Because basically it's just play more. So, in terms of countering your opponent, we have a couple of things that we can counter. So let's just go through the cards. We have Master the Paths, destroy a hero this battle. So a lot of people thought, I think, that has to happen on your own turn. But the condition is that at the end of your turn, you just check if this has happened, you complete it, if an enemy hero has been destroyed this battle. So it doesn't have to be a turn. So you can destroy a hero on your off turn, and then still score it on your own turn. So as an opponent, what do I want to do here? I just want to kill any one hero. For me, how I interpret it is Iridan can get away, generally through either power through, translocate, or her own prayer on a 3-up. Gotrek needs more investment than my opponents generally think. So if I play against Master of the Paths, I will put Gotrek for sure in a forest to get a -1 to hit as well. Either that or make him move next to places of power for the healing. So Cyclic Shifts is an ideal battle plan for Gotrek in this regard, with just places of power all laid out on the board, and you can just really start chilling in concealing terrain. Benefit from cover. So if my opponent wants to Alpha Strike, he will have -1 to hit on Gotrek. Then I have a Knight Relictor that is usually a sacrificial piece. If my opponent plays Master Paths, then it can be wise to play more defensively and just keep him alive. Knight Arcanum can basically go in the corner. My last hero is the Lord Terminals. Lord Terminals generally doesn't really die. It takes a lot of effort. If there's anyone who will die, quite likely it is him though, because he does push himself up. But that is why I also have the Legendary Tenacity on him to heal him on a 3-up. So Master Paths, you're not gonna fully deny it. Master Paths is awful. Master Paths, you're not gonna fully deny it over the course of the game, but if you deny it the first 2 turns, maybe 3 turns, then there's no way that the opponent can still get this, especially because the second one of Master of the Paths is also very punishing. So If there's no neutral territory on the battle plan, then basically you just have to make sure that every turn you have a unit in your opponent's deployment. If there is, then I mean I have about 8 units, and I really want to play in the center. So generally, this is quite easy for me to counter. You can check this at the end of every turn. You can check at the start of your opponent's turn with movement. I'll just put down some kind of army just to have a bit more context, maybe. Wow, okay, that's nice. So, for example, I'm just trying to put my opponent deployed some stuff. It's all doing well, doesn't really matter. So, if your opponent has a big chunk army like that, well, probably the warriors would be a bit more informed than the knights on the flank. It doesn't really matter too much. So your opponent has an army standing there. You can plan it out like this would be deployment. My opponent has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 units. In this case, I have about 7. He first has to kill a hero, and then he can move on with the second one. So master paths, I think, is a really difficult one. And then the last one, if you get to this stage, then you don't have to worry about it anymore. So restless, yeah, I wouldn't bother. Intercept and recover is an interesting one, because especially for Stormcast, it really influences your deployment, or at least for me. So generally, this would be my preferred deployment with. So I have 3 units in reserve, 4 units on the board, because Gotrek doesn't count as a Stormcast unit, so I have to deploy 4 Stormcast units. Intercept and recover requires you to start the battle. Your opponent must pick 3 of their units on the battlefield to be carrying the treasure. So that means that the units have to be on the board to be able to be picked. What are good targets for this? For me, I would say there's 2 options. If your opponent does not have a lot of high movement or long-range threats, then you take pieces that you can tuck in the corner and don't participate in the battle, such as the Maricanum. If your opponent doesn't have the damage output necessary to take away key pieces, then you put it on Gotrek. You put it on the concussors, and maybe the reclusions. Reclusions is a bit of an odd one, because if there's grinding going on, they will quite likely die at some point. However, reclusions, I would say, is a safer pick than the terminals, because the terminals does get targeted quite a bunch. And the reclusions, they can go down in hit points up to a point where you can teleport them away, and then you still have your treasure. So I would put them probably preferably on the reclusions. Also, Eridan is actually a great choice. She hasn't really died that much, I would say, in my games, mostly because of the possible Translocate, the power through, and also her own thing. The Rampage or the 3+, you move somewhere else and you get a Mindset tilt. So she doesn't really die that much, especially with the place of power healing as well. So these would be my top choices to put the treasure on. Now, depending on my army, my opponent's army, this would shift. So, for example, against this, a lot of Chaos Knights, they have high threat range, they are very mobile, but once they go into the grind, they don't perform that well. So I would put it on Gotrek for sure. Also because the Chaos Knights have quite a big footprint. So if we check this out, in order for the Chaos Knights to be in range or with Gotrek, like probably you can get 8 on them, maybe all 10 if you really cram in and have perfect placement. However, if you put Gotrek then like here, then suddenly it's not going to be possible anymore to get these 10 Chaos Knights in. It's just too big of a footprint. It's probably you get about 7. With 7 Chaos Knights on the charge, they have to be cornered to have a bit of a chance at dealing with Gotrek, because they have 3 attacks each. So 7 times 3, 21 attacks, more or less. 28 with Corn, so 3 plus 2 hit, 3 plus 2 wound, plus 1 to wound with the crazy guy. So that would be about 20 hits, 40 wounds. Gotrek will die to that. Yeah, Gotrek will die. So even to 7 you will die. But then your opponent is committing his big block to that. So, you do have to commit quite a bit to get rid of him. Off the charge, they will not kill him. So that is quite good. So Gotrek is definitely an option here. Iridan is an option as well, mostly because of the teleport and all the wacky I get away from you kind of stuff. The Reclusions would be my third pick, and this is where the Stormreach portal actually comes in. So I wouldn't choose the Knight Arcanum because the mobility of my opponent is too high. So in that case, the deployment actually shifts. I sacrifice my prayer points that I bank with the Knight Elector to be on the board. Because in cyclic shifts, what I like, what anyone should do, I think, is to deploy a unit such that you can redeploy onto the objective here to just tie the objectives at the first round. Have my Stormreach portal here so that I can go there and then teleport away the unit that is here. Normally the Reclusions would be in the sky, basically being close to the portal. They are effectively in the sky, but I can put the treasure on them. So in this case, I have my perfect situation of having my treasure on the Reclusions. They can get whittled down in combat, but as they get whittled down, I can teleport them away. And I think this is quite a solid setup like this for intercept and recover. So if my opponent is not very mobile, like Nurgle, then I would definitely put the mage on the table, give him a treasure. Maybe even the Knight Relictor and just not use him, like put him in the corner, give him a treasure, and pick off the treasure of Iridan. Iridan has a resistance rule, so against Nurgle, right, a low mobile army, just put him in there, bank some points, and then if you see that the enemy is getting closer, you just teleport to a different corner. So it's easy as that. So that would be an option as well. So if your opponent does not have intercept and recover, but wrathful cycles, so first one is control more than your opponent, is basically playing the game. Second is you have to be the underdog. Well, there's already a clue of what has to happen then. So if you can focus on not getting your opponent to be the underdog, so be the underdog yourself, then that is all fine. What is funny is that with intercept and recover restless energy, there's no incentive to go for any of the tactics at the start of the game. Like intercept doesn't get more difficult over time. But sure, I mean the choices or the options that you have in your opponent's army of what you have to destroy get increasingly difficult, because you can first start with an easy thing to destroy and then work your way up. But Restless also doesn't really get much more difficult. It's if you manage Restless, manage Restless the first one, you do, because you just play the game. Second one really depends on the battle plan, but if your opponent comes towards you, then generally with Stormcast you can manage, because it's usually 1 or 2 objectives. Third one is really dependent on how the game is going, so you don't have to think about it at all. So the good thing there is that you don't have to consider your own tactics, basically, in terms of how you play the game. And then Raffle Cycles, so what I was going to say is, if you have to be the underdog, it's not a bad thing, because you can save your tactics for the last 3 turns of the game. Sure, you can score Restless earlier, probably you will at some point, because this will happen. But that At that point, probably your opponent will also have scored some points. So making yourself be the underdog for the first couple of turns against raffle cycles is very strong. And then again, there will be a point in the game where your opponent will still struggle, because half of his friendly units still have to use a fight ability. Now against Chaos this will quite likely happen, but something like Realm Lords or some like Slanesh might not even find all the models willing to just fight, or even Rats like Skaven. They have so much supportive stuff that doesn't want to fight. And the last one, yeah, basically it's if your opponent won the game, then it's hopeless to try and counter that. Scouting Force. Scouting Force is a very interesting one in terms of countering, because it can very effectively be countered with counter charges. So say I kinda screwed up my deployment. Well, I don't know if I screwed it up, but if I did it like this, and my opponent has some movement tricks to get these knights all the way here, in a bit of a less clumsy formation, probably a bit more squeezed together, still a guy there. So then we look at the first one for Scouting Force. Every non-hero infantry, non-hero cavalry unit becomes a scout unit, and then, well, the first one is to just get out of your deployment. That seems quite easy. Well, on cyclic shifts it's really easy, because the only thing you have to do is to just move like this. Oh, I'm losing some knights. Oh, they died, oh no. So this you cannot prevent, basically. So if I were to go first, I really wanted to deny this. You can put first occlusions terminals here. You could do this. Is it a bad play? Don't even know if it's a bad play. Like with this guy probably within 3 inches of the. Oh, you don't really need to make the thing obscuring either, probably. You can do something like this. So you will go. So you could do something like this, because your opponent then has to go out of their deployment with 3 units. Well, I mean, in this case you would have 3 units out, and just ignore the Chaos Warriors. Chaos Warriors would also probably go out. However, the thing is that in scouting, you cannot complete the battle tactics with scout units that are in combat at all, for all of them. So if I get a counter charge here, this one, it's on a 7 in this case. I think a lot of people will not recognize the fact that with a counter charge you can just completely shut down that tactic. So it is a question of whether you want to or not. You just also, if you have the command points, you can roll the dice and see what you get. Because usually for me with 5 drops, my opponent forces me to go first. I tend to put down the reclusions in a useful position. This could be a useful position as well. Or you would deploy probably here. So I don't know if I can actually get into the objective turn 1. You have this one. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Okay. So yeah, you could put some stuff on the objective. But yeah, then the opponent moves up, has some choices to make, and then you do have your counter charge available to shut down the scouting. So it also applies to the second and the third one, and these are your best ways of negating scouting force, other than to just kill units. I mean, killing units is pretty effective at making sure your opponent doesn't have units to score scouting force. The only downside is that replacement units also count, so against Skaven it's practically hopeless if you go for the kill, unless you manage to wipe them. But still, there's the clause of not being in combat. So, especially for the second and the third, so 3 or more objectives or terrain features you control They must be within enemy territory. So if you look at this one, it's only the obstacle and the obscuring terrain. I think they ruled that faction terrain was not going to count for this anymore. I don't know. Maybe the portal then. So it could be a counterplay as well to just not put down the portal if your opponent has scouting force. I think there was a fact or an FAQ about this, but I would have to read it again. It might be that faction terrain doesn't count anymore for scouting force. But let's say we have this situation. My opponent wants to, well, he moved up a bit. He wants to score the second one of scouting force. Oh, life counter. He wants to score the second one of scouting force. So what can I do to prevent this? Well, there's two pieces of terrain here. Let's say it's my turn. I get some time to prepare for this. I still have my unit of concussors that can just go into the forest. I also have gold track here, by the way. So I can also put the concussors down here. So basically, well, I can basically play a bit defensively. Something like this, maybe? Well, one thing you can do is just to lock up some units of your opponent with some of your own, and your opponent has to use a retreat to get away from that. Then it will be your opponent's turn. Either they retreat or they don't, obviously. So if my opponent wants to score this stuff, then he has to basically have either 3 units, scouting units, or he has to get rid of the concussors in this scenario. Because going into here, you cannot contest the objective. Even if your control score is higher than mine, you cannot score the objective if you are in combat. So even if he goes in here, he tags everything, he kills plenty to just get me out of combat. If I countercharge the Mitre with the Nitrolictor and he doesn't kill that one, then he cannot score scouting force, which is quite a big thing. It's like I wouldn't bank on Nitrolictor surviving against a big combat unit, obviously. But if you can make your opponent have to stretch his resources to kill everything, then you can deny this one. Same goes for the last one, so this one is even more restrictive. So friendly scout unit not set up this turn, contesting a terrain feature you control wholly within enemy territory more than 6 from friendly. So on this map that is not even this one, because this one is not wholly within enemy territory, so it would only be this obstacle, and your opponent has to have a unit there that is not in combat, so you can just leave this here basically, and then if your opponent goes here, you can countercharge. And then, yeah, just deny the tactic basically. So scouting force, just a clause that they are not able to be in combat, that changed the world for me with regards to counterplay. Then we have a tune to Gairan. I think this is the worst tactic you can choose. Please don't choose this one. So I also spoke with some other, or I had some discussions about this with some other people, and they also said, yeah, this is definitely the worst because it doesn't flow. So the first part is have 2 units in the middle. Sure, no biggie. So you have 2 units that focus on the middle, and then basically your army, either you sacrifice 2 units, like with the old seize the center battle tactic, or you put your big stuff in the middle. So for this Chaos Knight army, this would be quite detrimental because they really benefit from the charge. Your opponent will be set up for something to go in, and then you can just move out, charge Chaos Knight, and then Chaos Knights will not be happy in the grind generally. So that is fine. It is not fine for all armies, but it is fine. Then afterwards, you have the phase strike. Phase strikes is it's crazy. It's incredibly difficult. So, first condition: two friendly units use the retreat ability. They explain in an FAQ that these units actually have to move during this retreat move, because there was an argument to be made that you can use a retreat ability but not move, stay in combat, and then don't take the models as well. So you just say, oh, I retreat, and you don't. So you have to retreat now. So the situation should be that you start your turn like this, basically, with two units in combat, in this case an Exalted Hero and a Chaos Knight. They both have to retreat. So you didn't want to be in combat here anyways, with a unit that at the start of your turn is in combat, that your opponent charged, probably, or that has been grinding out with your opponent. So either it's a unit that grinds really, really well and doesn't die, that you suddenly want to get out of that combat, or it's a unit that accidentally got into combat with your opponent. So if you see this, if you see that your opponent does this basically with a very tanky anvil unit, and that doesn't deal damage instead of Chaos Warriors, and something like something Shakti, I don't know, the Exalted Hero is here as well for the first part of the Tune to Garan. Sure, you go in, cool, all nice and well. So imagine that I would focus fully on Chaos Warriors and I wipe half of them. Well, that would be a bit sad, but imagine that happens. Now it's going to be my opponent's turn, and then he doesn't want to retreat from this. Like, he also did some damage, quite likely. He gets his first activation in this turn, he gets to strike with something, he can remove another guy, maybe another guy. He doesn't want to retreat with any of this. It's like, so, even if that happens, sure, you set it up, you have an army that likes it, like Flashy to Courts with Morbid Knights that can retreat and charge without taking damage. Amazing. Night Horns, retreat and charge, I guess. Then you have two other friendly units use a charge, and one of them ended the charge within combat of, in this case, this unit. So that is also still manageable, like they retreated, then you have some support hero that went in probably twice or something, or you still have your other dedicated unit that went in. Now, how can you counterplay this? Because we were counterplaying stuff. So what you can do is so make sure that your opponent is not in combat with two of your units. So for example, we were in the situation where we had this. In this case we only have one unit in combat with Reclusions. I charged in with the Concussors, did some damage. I powered through, 10 inches away. My opponent starts his turn. He only has one unit in combat. Cannot score a Tune to Garan. This is one of the easiest things. Another option for Stormcast, I have my Priest here, I didn't have command points for power through, I spent one command point on the 2+, I teleport the Concussors away. They're gone now, they are just somewhere else. Those are two ways in which Stormcast specifically can do it, and there's a lot of other armies that can do the same. You also have the out of activation moves basically, and just killing stuff really. Like if I go in and I don't focus specifically on the warriors, but I focus on getting the hero killed. So in this scenario my opponent could still manage a Tune to Garan because he could retreat the Chaos Warriors and retreat the Chaos Knights, charge in on this with the Chaos Knights and then charge somewhere else, maybe air down or something. Do you really want to leave two combats that you don't want to? No. So a Tune to Garan, second one, easy counterplay I would say. And then, I mean, you don't get to the last one, so it doesn't really matter. And the last one is even just punishing as well. yeah, so that's all of them. I thought I had a bit more advice, but I think it's also mostly, yeah, Master Buffs. I didn't really speak too much about this hero thing, other than when you have 5 heroes. So the alternative would be that you play against the list with Archeon or Karazai without any support heroes, or like a one drop basically. You have one hero, that's it. So then counterplay is really easy. You don't have to do anything. Yeah. So this is also why I really prefer to have Intercept and Recover and Restless Energy. Because they just allow you to just play the game, continue on, not worry about tactics too much, not worry about counterplay from your opponents too much. And you can decide at the point where you win priority for a double that you want to take it or not. And then it's not a bad downside that your opponent can remove a trash. It's gonna be all. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you the next time.